Let's take a look at how you can authorize applications using SAI and specifically SAI.js. On the right, we'll have a little helpful diagram that shows different security contexts. On the left, we can see the end user security context, where we have their identity and their authorization server or authorization agent. In the middle, we can see the application or the client. And on the right, we can see the resource owner context, security context, with the resource authorization server and the resource server. There can be multiple ones. There is a special case when the end user and the resource owner are the same agent, but in general, in a social graph, when other people and organizations share data with you, those two are distinct parties. So on the left, we have a UI to the SAI authorization agent, or here it's called the user authorization server. We can log in here. And here on the right, as you can see, this is different URL. This is the client, the application we'll use for this example. As you can see, okay, we triggered the authorization screen, but before we dive into that, let's see quickly, as a user authorization server, it has equivalent access as the user themselves. So it has full access to all the data that the user can access. So it has a very minimal file browser that only allows you to see the labels of the resources we have access to. So we can see as Bob, we have a one storage with 2 projects and some tasks of those projects. And more importantly, we have a social graph with 3 other peers, Yo-Yo, Alice, and Acme, who also share some data with us. So for example, we can take a look at Alice shares data from one pod, and there are some just projects and tasks of those projects. So now we can take a look at authorization screen again. Okay, we'll see here what Bob can access in their own storage, so pretty much everything. And here, first of all, you can see that our authorization will take the access needs from the application and only pre-populate the screen with what the application has requested. So the names of types of resources come from shape trees, which are trusted reference that user has full confidence. So there is no possibility that the application will spoof the labels and try to request access to something else than what user is expecting. And those can be internationalized. I have another demo that shows that you can have it in different languages. And the application only tells why you want to access this type of data, for what purpose. And besides that, we have a scopes where we have the whole social graph, including ourselves. And we can give a very blanket access, everything that I can access to, again, given those type restrictions. But when it comes to social graph and storages, everything, or we can be more specific. So if we start with ourselves, we are Bob in this case, we can be selective and say we only want to select specific project from the one storage that I have. As you can see, I have 2 projects here, but we will only allow one of them to be accessed by the application. And something similar has been presented a year ago by Michael de Jong, who presented App Launcher that uses ACP and ICP client restrictions to authorize applications in a more granular way. In this example, it was authorizing bookmarks. I'm using projects and tasks here. But this approach has a limitation that you can only authorize access to your own data. So if the end user and the resource owner are the same, this approach works. But if they are distinct, so you work with data that was shared with you from other peers in your social graph, your app launcher will not have access to the ACP policies of those storages, so it will not work anymore. With SAI, we use delegation and we use custom policy engine, and it allows us to actually enforce those restrictions across our social graph. So let's get back to our authorization screen. We selected that from our storage, there's only one project that we allow application to access. Now let's deal with the social graph. Let's say Alice, as we have seen, shares some project from one of her storages, but we will say that this application will not have access to anything from Alice, so we just unselected it. Now when it comes to Yo-Yo, Yo-Yo shares with Bob projects from one storage. It can have many storages. Bob doesn't have to know how many storages Yo-Yo has. All we know that it shares some projects from one of those storages. What we'll leave is the default Auth from agent scope. So in the future, I will make a video when Yo-Yo shares projects from other storage, from the NA storage with Bob, and this authorization will automatically generate grants for the application to also give it access, because we give very broad Auth from agent access. So this is a material for another demonstration. So now we are left with Acme. And we can see that Acme shares data from two storages, from the HR and R&D. So there are some projects in HR storage, and we can see equivalent here. But we will unselect the HR. We will not share anything from HR. We will only share everything from the R&D storage. So this is the storage here that will authorize application to access. We unselected completely HR, and we give full access to everything that it's now and in the future shared from that storage. So we can finish with Acme, and now we will apply those authorizations. It will save access authorizations in Bob's authorization registry, and from there it will generate access grants for Vujectron and save it in the Vujectron agent registration. So we can go back here, and now we can see again Bob has two projects, but we only shared one. So we only see the one the application knows about and can access only one of the projects that Bob has in his storage. When we look at the social graph, first of all, Alice doesn't appear. Applications doesn't even know that Bob knows Alice or has any data sharing relation with her, because we didn't authorize application to access anything that Alice shares with us. Again, we are Bob here. Now for the Yo-Yo, we can see here there's only one storage with few projects, and we can see exactly the same projects because we allowed everything. In next demo, I will demonstrate that when Yo-Yo shares projects from another storage, it will automatically appear in the applications through the notification systems, and Bob will not have to take any further action. And lastly, if we look at Acme, again, we can see that we didn't share access to the HR storage, so it doesn't appear here. So those projects are not accessible for the application. And those, we said everything from the R&D storage can be accessed by the application. So now application can discover and access that data. So as we see with SAI, we can authorize applications in more responsible way. We can be very selective or very broad how we want to set the access policy for applications, using first of all types of data, which are references to shape trees, and second our social graph, so the agents, people and organizations, and the storages of those agents. And again, we can even go as granular as specify specific projects or other type of data that applications requesting access to from those storages of those agents. So we can be very responsible with how we authorize applications to access data that we own and that are shared with us across peers in our social graph. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and please stay tuned for next demo.